My name is Liz Sudlow, and together with my husband Tony, we farm 5,700 hectares in the Shire of Northampton. So our main property is here at Kapari where we live. We also have another property that's closer to Northampton and then a small grazing block south of Northampton. We have three main enterprises on our farm, so cereal growing, cropping, and also sheep and stud Angus cattle. And I've been involved in the drought planning project as part of the advisory group. Okay, so drought is a difficult thing to define. It's been one of in different areas around the country. There are a wide range of definitions, but for our area where we are here in the northern wheat belt in Western Australia, we really feel that we need at least 150 mils of rain in the growing season to be able to grow something. Anything less than that is problematic. Also, it depends on the timing of rainfall. So generally speaking, you need a good start and you need a good finishing rains, and usually the middle part of the season will take care of itself. So a drought is anything less than that, I guess. So in 2006 and 2007, we had significant drought in this northern wheat belt area. In 2006 we had 76 mils of rain in the growing season, so that's a long way short of 150. And the following year I think we had 130 mils, but because it was a lot more, but because it had been so dry there was no rain in the bank, so to speak. So, and certainly the implications for even a dry season can carry on over the following summer. So certainly it can be a bit of a long-term thing, and financially it can last. There can be a real lag that goes on for many years after that, which certainly was the case for us after the 2006-07 droughts. One of the other issues is what they call a hot drought, which might be a spike in temperatures. Particularly a risky time of the year is August. So as the crops are starting to fill out and hopefully they're still green and they're bulking up, but if you get a hot spell there, that can cause an awful lot of trouble. We have categorised our land into three different soil types pretty much. So our good sandplain, which has a clay base, we use primarily for cropping. Then we also have some country that is much heavier in its soil content and more difficult to grow a crop on in many cases. That generally is used for grazing, and we might crop that land sort of every 3 to 5 years. And then we've also got some lighter sand that's a bit more undulating, which is less productive from a cropping point of view, that we have planted to perennials that we graze our cattle on. So actually our least productive land in terms of cropping, we now run our stud cattle on, which is probably our most profitable enterprise. So from a cropping perspective, after the droughts, we certainly focused more on that good cropping country that we would crop continuously, and are very mindful about the heavier soil types. If it looks like it's not going to, we're much more flexible than we used to be in our cropping program. So if it looks like it's going to be a dry season, we might decide not to crop some of that heavier country for two reasons. One, to enable our stock to graze on it, but also so the later it is, the later you get the rainfall, then the increasing loss of potential. So harder to grow a crop on heavy soil, whereas the sandplain tends to be a bit more forgiving. We're much more mindful of the timing around things. So in the old days we would put nitrogen on at the start, pre-emergence, so before as you were seeding. Now we tend to do that in 2 or 3 applications as the season goes on. So if it looks like it's being dry, you won't put as much nitrogen down, because that can, you want to save money. If you don't need to put it down, then you won't. But also, nitrogen is really good for a healthy crop that's growing in a good season. But if it's a crop that is suffering through lack of rainfall, then adding nitrogen will cause that plant to speed up its growing process, so the grain will be smaller and it will bulk to finish the season more early. So that's another strategy. Another thing that we've done with the cropping would be to really take care of the health of our soil. So we have a very significant liming program that started probably back in about 1999, so well before the droughts, whereby we spread lime on our paddocks, and the point of that is to lower the pH, but also enable the roots of the plants to get down deeper. So the deeper that they can get down into the soil profile, the there's more moisture down there, and also it makes for a stronger plant. So that's certainly something that we have been doing. Another thing in terms of soil health is what we call amelioration, where you turn the soil over. So particularly for lighter sandplain or non-wetting soils, to be able to turn it over so that the clay content comes to the top, alters the soil profile, helps to prevent wind erosion from that lighter soil from blowing away, and again it also helps to enable what moisture there is that we get to be able to be retained in the soil profile. So that's another couple of things that we have done. As a result of the drought, we probably have changed our practices. Our breeding practices, we tend to look now for a cow that is more moderate in its conditions. So we don't want high growth, lean animals. We want animals that are probably a bit smaller, have a bit more fat content, because we've found that those animals tend to do better in dry conditions. So they tend to be able to look after their calf better. We have changed our shearing time. So previously we used to shear in July, whereas now we've brought that back to March. And the reason for that was if you are experiencing a drought or a dry season in July, you've got ewes that are about to lamb or lambing, and if they're in poor conditions, very difficult to shear them. Also, if there's a dry season, you get a break in the wool. So if we've shifted our shearing to March, when it might, there's the potential for a month or so where it might be dry, the break in the wool will be then. So it actually, right, by the time you come to shear, it will be at the top of the fleece. So that's another thing that we have done. We now have probably 15 to 16 lick feeders that are one feeder for each paddock, so the sheep can feed themselves as they need to, and we found that that's been really useful in terms of the ewes don't miss mother. So in a dry season, if they're wandering along behind a vehicle, particularly if they're in poor condition, they're much more likely to walk away from their animals. So that's another strategy which has been game changing for our area. Obviously we are much more, in terms of both the sheep and the cattle, we're much more concerned with keeping hay and grain on store on farm. So for our sheep, we keep lupins on stock, so we keep about 200 tonne of lupins on the farm. We sell lupins to CBH obviously, but we keep back about another 200 tonne that we don't sell until the following financial year. So they're harvested in November, December. We wouldn't sell that until the following July, when we're convinced that the next season will be okay. Because in the droughts we had to buy back lupins that we'd sold the previous year for twice the price, so that was quite a difficult thing to do. In terms of the cattle, we try to grow our own at least 2 years supply of hay. So we keep that on store under tarpaulins that we get from CBH. And again, in the droughts, when we needed to buy in hay, obviously it's at a premium price. So those sorts of things, we're trying to make ourselves more resilient, I guess. Particularly in the area of agronomy, I think that the industry has done some fantastic things in terms of breeding new varieties of wheat and things like that, ones that are more drought tolerant or will grow on lower amounts of rainfall and a sort of shorter growing time frame. It's important for our area, so we're certainly always looking to trial those sorts of newer varieties. I guess it's just about making sure that you're always doing things to make your property and your business as resilient as it can be. So in the years that are more profitable, ensuring that you spend on the infrastructure that will help you in the times where it's not. So making sure that all of your water supplies and things like that are as good as they can be. Just being open to investigating new ideas. Obviously, to look after the soil is a really important and an ongoing one. So we would be keen to do all that we can to make sure that our soil is in the best position to be able to make the most of the rainfall that we do receive. Yeah, I guess it's just about putting yourself in the very best position that you can be to make yourself as resilient as you can be. Obviously being mindful of still needing to be profitable and make money. You've got to keep a balance with looking after your farm and your soil and what you're trying to do, but also ensuring that you are sustainable and you are there for the long term. It's no good if you have that out of balance and you go out of business. I think we need to be realistic about the area where we do farm. Obviously it is a drier area relative to some of the rest of Australia. and we're very efficient farmers in Western Australia, but certainly in this northern wheatbelt area. It's important to remember that you will have years that are wet, you will have years that are dry, and I guess every now and again you will have years that are ones that we would term drought, and you just have to put that into your farming cycle, or you know, the long-term planning that you do to try and ensure that you're best placed when those years do happen, which obviously you don't know when it's going to happen, but to make sure that you're in the best place to be able to deal with them.